For episode 9, we're about to meet Regine Cesaire. She's a designer from Paris. So the story begins late at night in the backyard of the Countess's house. Countess de Valson just told Jim, the holograms and Rio, the reason why she's throwing this party in the first place. It's for Regine. We're about to meet her in just a minute. Of course, Countess de Valson said that there's something even better. She's a big, huge fan of Jim and the holograms themselves. And there's Regine now, talking to her guests. Countess de Valson also explains that Regine just couldn't wait to impress both Jim and the band themselves. So, Countess de Valson told Jim and the holograms, I hope you and your girls can influence her a little bit. So Jim and the holograms agreed to help out Countess de Valson and said, we'll do our best. So while Rio stays behind, Jim and the holograms went ahead and met Regine by the Countess. So Regine went up to Jim, shook her hand, and said, pleased to meet you. So when Shayna approached her, the first thing she did was to make a compliment with Regine to say, your designs are wonderful. Why, thank you very much, Regine said. So Regine told Shayna, I'm glad you thought so, because she said she's getting worried that she may not like it. Shayna, that is, since Regine herself has been impressed with Shayna's designs as well. After Shayna and Regine had hugged each other, Regine wasted no time to show Shayna the latest designs, and so were her friends, Kimber, Rhea, and Aja. Shayna, as you can tell, is very impressed, and when Jim shows up minutes later, she says that she has an idea. She also said that even better, since the concert's coming up, Regine should pick our outfits so that we can decide on what we wanted. After Jim thought it over, she says, well, that's a wonderful idea. Now, Regine, who overheard what Jim said, she too thought it was a great idea, so she said that she'll get to work right away. Then Regine suddenly had a thought and then asked the holograms of what they were looking for. Kimber, Asha, and Rhea were looking at each other and said that they weren't sure. Even Jim said that she too isn't sure. But Jim and the holograms knew in order to inspire Regine the best way that they knew how, they go into the exact same song as they did 2 seasons ago from episode 12. Depends on what mood I'm in. So when the song came to an end, Regine thought it over and said that she had a better suggestion. So Kimber asked Regine, what kind of idea do you have in mind? What is it? I can't tell you just yet, Regine said. But she says even better, it's a surprise. So the very next morning, Countess de Valson and Regine went to the Fabric Town fabric shop. So once the women went inside, Regine wasted no time to pick out all the materials for the hologram's clothes. So when Countess de Valson was asking her, what are you doing? So Regine explains that she needed just the right materials for the hologram's clothes, and she needed just enough designs to do it. So Countess de Valson wanted to know from Regine, what kind of clothes do you have in mind? So once Regine picked out the materials, Regine was asked by Countess de Valson if she was sure, and shouldn't the designs be shown first? But Regine refused and said it is supposed to be a surprise. But what Regine doesn't know is that she saw a red carpet coming out of nowhere. And then she follows the carpet, and so did Countess de Valson, and what they saw was unbelievable. A horse carriage. So when Regine saw the horseman carriage, she couldn't believe it. She felt like she was Cinderella or something. But the Countess sensed that something was off. So when Regine approached the carriage and looked inside, it's the Stingers. So right of the Stingers says, pleased to meet you. Come inside. So Regine went into the horse carriage to join up with the Stingers. So now that Regine's inside the carriage with the Stingers, they had a conversation with each other. So Regine goes first to speak in her case to say this is wonderful and that she's like in a fairy tale and etc. So after Riot of the Stingers brushes off Rapture's claims, he said that he's more concerned of Regine's talent itself. So Riot of the Stingers told Regine that he has a favor for her. And as a matter of fact, Riot says in his case it's a special one. So Regine wants to know from Riot of the singers what favor she wants from him. And Riot gave her a surprise favor to make something for the stingers, something really special. Regine's in shock. So she says, really? So Riot not only tells her that yes, she will, but he says, just let your imagination run its course. So Riot says that even better, he can make her famous if she did that. So Regine said that she'll do it, but under one condition, if she could finish up something special for the holograms first. So Minx goes first to speak in her case that the holograms had no style, no taste whatsoever. Then Rapture goes next to speak in her case to say Jim and the holograms are much too ordinary to appreciate Regine's designs anyway. Now us, on the other hand, we know exactly how to capture the people's attention. So to make that case clear, the Stingers go into their song called All in the Style. So after the song came to an end, Regine was asked by Riot of the Singers if she would go with them. Now Regine just told Riot of the Singers, now don't take it wrong, I would like to really, but I made a promise to Jim. I can't go back on the promise that I made with her now. So Regine wants to know from the Stingers if they would wait a little longer. So after the Stingers started over, Riot agrees to stop the carriage. So after Regine got off the carriage, Riot tells her, we're making you an opportunity of a lifetime. You know, someone is perfect like myself personally, Riot explains. Before Riot could leave, he says, do yourself a favor, and me too. Don't throw it away. And so after that, the carriage left. So after the carriage left, Regine, however, is very confused. Who will she impress the best, Jim or Riot of the Stingers? So later, now that Regine has finished all her designs, she went to Starlight Mansion. So Shayna the Holograms went ahead and let in Regine. So after Regine was let in, so when Regine went into the living room, she saw Jim on the floor with Becky and Layla doing the jigsaw puzzle. At the table, Regine just saw Kimber with Annie, Chrissy, and Jolene, one of Dondra's sisters, at the table. Then Regine looks in the kitchen where she saw Ashley doing dishes and helping out were Dondra and her two sisters and Aja. Then Regine looks in the sofa to see Rhea sitting there reading a book to Terry, Bonnie, Marianne, who's 9 years old, and another one of Dondra's sisters. So Regine was asking Shayna, why are you doing these things? So when Jim shows up minutes later, she was more than happy to answer Regine's question. She says, well, glamour may be best, but sometimes there are more things that are important than that. Shayna, who agrees with Jim, she then told Regine, well, you see, taking care of these Starlight girls is what we do best. So Regine says, okay, okay. Then she said that she had some good news. She brought some costumes for the Holograms this concert, and Jim and the Holograms were more than happy to try them on. So that's what they did. So the Holograms tried on their first outfit. The Starlight Girls clapped and cheered. So Regine was asking what she thought of it, Jim, that is. Then Jim told Regine, well, they're nice, unique in a way. Not bad, I do say so myself, but. But what? Regine asked. What's wrong? Well, Kimber says, you see, they're not us. Then Jim says, I think what Kimber meant to say is simply this. They just don't look right for the concert, that's all. When Regine heard that, she got upset, and then she told Jim, well, if you didn't like the clothes so much, then you should have just said so. So Jim says, no, no, it's not that at all. It's just not appropriate, that's all, Jim said. So Regine, who was distraught and upset, says, all right, fine, I'll go make something else. And so she left the Starlight Mansion. Before Regine can leave, Jim runs to catch up with her and says, please don't be mad. I'm sure we can talk about it. But Regine left anyway. So Jim looked at her feminist and says, what, did I say something wrong? Later, at the Countess's house, that's Regine upstairs in the designing room. But no matter how many times Regine draws some designs, she just crumbles up in anger. When Countess de Vonson shows up minutes later, she can tell that something was off with her. So Countess de Vonson wants to know from Regine what was wrong with her, And Regine explains that when she left the Starlight Mansion earlier, Regine that is, she said that Jim and the Holograms didn't like her clothes. This is not like them at all, Countess Devoson says. Well, it's not like they hated the clothes themselves, Regine said. It's just that they won't use them for the concert, that's all. Well, Countess Devoson said when she tries to chirp Regine, it says, well, that's the price of being a designer. Sometimes it's just not the designs that you want. Well, Regine tries to design her designs with her pencil, but then her pencil broke. So after Regine broke her pencil, she told the Countess, oh, it's no use. And now Regine is getting worried because she told the Countess that she'll never get the designs done in time for the concert. You can't give up now, Countess Devances said, and then suggested that she should help Regine. Then Countess Devances says, I know the deadline's getting tight, but I can rest assure you we can both get them done in time. But Regine refused and says, although your help is appreciated, but I don't need it right now. But then, minutes later, the butler shows up and says it's an invitation for Regine, and it's a party at the Stinger Sound Record Company. So after Regine had learned the invitation by the Stingers themselves, she says, oh my goodness, I gotta get dressed and get there right away. Now Regine is wondering that she has a problem on her hands on what to wear when she gets there. But Countess Devonson has to stop Regine and says, what about the designs for Jim's concert? Well, Regine says, as the saying goes, all work and no play makes Regine a dull girl. So after Regine took off, that's when Countess made herself a case to say Regine's going to be so unemployed for this. Meanwhile, on the rooftop of Stinger Sound, while there's a party going on, Regine did what Riot said to do and met the Stingers there. But she's not alone because the rest of the guests are invited there as well. Before long, after being ignored by a bunch of party guests, that's when Regine just spotted Yuki that's standing at the fountain nearby. So after Yuki had ignored Regine, that's when Riot decides to approach her. He says, Regine, I'm glad you made it. So then Riot pleaded the case with Regine and says, I was just telling everyone what a great designer you are. Then Riot told Regine, well, even better, I hope you accept my offer for you to be our designer. For the Stingers, of course. Then when the party guests had overheard, one of them said, did Riot say a designer? Next thing you know, all the party guests are surrounding Regine, including Yuki, who snubbed her earlier. So the first thing he did when he approached her is that, oh my goodness, if I had known you were designing, I would never have snubbed you the way I did, and he apologized for it. Then Yuki told her, I would have treated you with respect and royalty. And that gives Regine an idea. And she says, that's it. So Regine told Riot of the Singers that she needed a pencil and pad of paper right away, and he agreed. So Regine was sitting at the table drawing all the royalty clothes. So Yoki, being curious, wants to know from her, did you always come up with ideas like that? Not always, Regine says, but whenever I come up with an idea, I just draw on this pad of paper right here. Riot, being curious, complimented to Regine on how beautiful it looks. Why, thank you very much, Regine said, and she said that she couldn't wait to show it to Sheena. So even though Riot of the Stingers agree with Regine, but then makes his case to say that Shayna will not appreciate it. Also, I can assure you to this, Riot says, they'll probably reject it. So the very next morning at Starlight Mansion's living room, that's exactly what Regine did. She showed all the royalty designs to the holograms. So Jim and the holograms, after they saw all the royalty designs that Regine did, she made a compliment. She says, well, royalty is exactly what we need. It's very nice. Well, Jim was about to finish her sentence to Regine to say, but just before she did so, you can tell that Regine was very annoyed. She says, oh, here we go again. Just when Shayna was about to have her turn to plead a case, but Regine interrupted Shayna and then told Jim and her band to say, if you didn't like me and my designs, then you should have just said so. Jim says, but we do like you. It's not like we're rejecting you, Shayna says. We really like you. We really do. In fact, we're just trying to help you, that's all. So Shayna made a suggestion. She says, I'll tell you what I'll do. Let me help you, and then we'll both decide on what we need. Then Regine made her case to say, maybe inside you, perhaps. But me? So as Regine packed up her designs, she told the holograms, maybe the stingers are right. You holograms don't have any class or taste. So then Jim tells Regine, so that's what's been going on with you. You've been hearing Riot, the leader of the stingers, instead of us. So then it's Asha's turn to tell Regine that Riot may be gentle and all, but he may try to use you somehow. Well, that's what you think, Regine said. So before Regine can leave, she told the holograms that she's going to where her talent's going to be appreciated, not insulted. Then Regine also said that that's where she should be. So after that, she left. Now, after Regine had left, the holograms and Jim looked at each other like, oh boy, look what we did. What have we done? So back at Stinger Sound the next morning, it was inside that the fashion show was going on with the Stingers. Both the photographers and the reporters are there, and also there was Regine. So after Regine, who heard what Raya said, she looks at Yoki, the guy that she met at the party the previous night, and says, that's not what I wanted Raya to say to the press. That's when Regine senses that something was off. Then Yoki, who told Regines, never mind about what they think. Just make sure to keep the Stingers happy, that's all. So now that the Stingers had finished their fashion show, everybody in the audience started clapping and cheering, and as you can see, they were in awe. Later, Regine decides to go on the Harriet Horn show. It was on the Harriet Horn show that Harriet wants to know from Regine that since she's a new popular designer, how she felt about it. Of course, Regine makes the case to say, I have no idea, or how to make of it. Of course, Harriet says that rumor has it that both she and Yoko must have hooked up somehow, she being case in point Regine. Of course, Regine makes the case that both she and Yoki did see each other for a while. So after the Harriet Holmes show, meanwhile at the shopping center, it was at the fabric store that Regine just heard Sheena's voice. So when Regine was asking, what are you doing here? Well, Sheena says, the holograms and I are looking for you everywhere. We were worried about you. So Regine says, really? And I suppose you can take me back to the somebody now? And she says, no, 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 it's not that at all. Then Shayna tells Regine, look, listen, I know the stingers, they may try to use you somehow. We just want you to use extreme caution about them, that's all. And of course, Shayna made the case that they may like you now, but they may turn against you one day. But Regine kind of brushes it off that the stinger only liked her for her talent and nothing else. That's when both Regine and Shayna had spotted Minx and Rapture on the way down nearby. Down on the escalator, that is. As Minx and Rapture were down on the escalator, they continued to overhear Shayna's conversation with Regine. And that's when she being Shayna, that is, try again to toss some sense into Regine. So Shayna, in response, gives the tickets to the Gym and the Holograms concert and says, here, maybe this should convince you otherwise that you like our music anyway, no matter where or whenever you may be. And of course, according to Shayna, that as a matter of fact, you're invited if you want. But that's when Shayna was approached by Minx and Rapture. Rapture speaks up to ask Regine, is Shayna bothering you? And then Minx made the case to ask Regine another question, or are you speaking to somebody else? Of course, what Minx said to Regine that she may be speaking to one of her enemies. And of course, Regine was confused, like, what? An enemy? And then she's asking Minx, what are you talking about? What enemy? And so Shayna was asking Minx, why don't you mind your own business? And that's when she was covered by Rapture of the Stingers. So while Shayna was covered by a bunch of plastic, that's when it's Minx's turn to pull her drink into Shayna's purse. So after that, both Rapture, Minx, Regine, and Yoki soon left. So while Regine was leaving with Yoki, she's like, well, that was very rude. And that's when Yoki tells Regine to say, pay no attention to Mix and Rapture, just remember who you're working with. So the four of them left the shopping mall. So, long story short, after Rapture had a conversation with Regine in Rapture's apartment, there's a meeting going on at the Stinger Sound's upstairs office. Here, you see Riot, the leader of the Stingers, talking to all of his staff members, including Minx and Rapture, and of course Regine and Yuki. Then the female staff member said that there's a problem with the network. The TV Saturday morning show that the Stingers was supposed to have, according to what the female staff member said, that the character needs to be more likable. But Riot rejects that idea and said to change it. So while the meeting's going on, Regine, meanwhile, did what Rapture said to do and looked through the crystal, through Riot's aura and his clothes and etc. That's when the female staff member continues to say that the network will go broke. Then Riot tells her, well, if it happens, then so be it. So after that, Riot looks at Regine and says, what do you think you're doing? And so Regine replied that she just did what Rapture said to do, look at his aura and his clothes. Then Riot says, really? Is that a fact? My aura, you say? And that's when all the staff members were laughing at Regine and humiliating her. Well, all that laughing and heckling just made Regine upset, and so she left the upstairs office. So, meanwhile, at Yuki's apartment, Regine doesn't realize that by the time she knocks on the door and there was no answer, she was unaware that she just overheard a conversation between Minx of the Stingers and, of course, Yuki. First thing that Yuki did was to ask a question to Minx to say, Riot wants to show my designs to him, like you promised. Is that correct? So, Minx of the Stingers made an assurance to Yoki to say, don't worry, you'll get exactly what you want. But then Regine just walks in on both Minx and Yoki. So after she catches them in the act, you can tell that Regine is very upset. She says, Yoki, how could you? Then she says, I thought you cared about me and my designs. True, Yoki said. Then Yorga just kind of let slip to say to Regine said, I had to admit, you are useful to me, but now I don't need you anymore. Now that I'm on my way up, well, that made Regine upset, and so she left Yorkie's apartment. So meanwhile, at Stinger Sound's upstairs office, when Regine came to see him, she says, here are the latest designs, and then she asked him what he thought of it. After Riot looked at him and then thought it over, he said, these won't do. So Regina apologized, and the reason being is because she's been lately under a lot of stress. Then she explains to how Yoki and Regine had broken up earlier after she caught him with Minx in the apartment earlier. But Riot tells her that he's not interested in her personal problems. Quite frankly, Rice says when he decided to drop a bombshell on Regine to say, I'm very bored with you right now. He also said that it's time for something new. So, Regine was told by Riot that she had to leave. But Regine says, no way! And she told Riot, and I quote, that you promised me that you like me after I become famous and all that. That's true, Riot said. You did have a chance to bask in my glory, but not anymore. Then minutes later, Riot's bandmates and along with Yoki shows up, so Minx just told Riot the good news, and that Yoki just created his latest designs for him. Yoki, that is. So, according to what Regine said in her mind, that what Sheena told her was absolutely true. So before she left Riot's office, she told Yoki, well, I may have liked you today, but I don't like you anymore. So after that, she left Riot's office. So later that night, back in the upstairs room of the Countess's house, Regine, now all by herself, is guilt-ridden, ashamed, and depressed. She thought about what Shayna said earlier back at the mall, and that she chose to ignore Shayna's warnings about the singers and that she'd be replaced. Well, now she wished she had. So, now looking at the ticket that Regine had earlier from Shayna, and she thought about what Shayna said, that you're more than welcome to join Jim and the Holograms at the concert no matter where or when. So, when the night of the concert finally came, there's only one thing that Regine can do, is that she went to the dressing room to confess. But first of all, Regine explains what happened at the meeting earlier at Stinger Sound's office and that she was laughed at and humiliated. Then Regine says, wait, there's more, because she just earlier had caught Yuki talking to Minx at the Stingers at his apartment. So then Regine looks at Shane and says, you were right. The Stingers were trying to use me. You tried to warn me, but I wouldn't listen. Now I wished I had. To make Regine feel better, so Shayna told her, well, your career's not exactly over. In fact, it's just beginning. Then Regine says, but there's only one problem. What am I going to do now? I don't have time to make those costumes. The worst of it all, Regine says, I'm afraid I let you down. So Jim decided to make a suggestion. She says, go sit in the audience because we have a surprise just for you. Regine says, really? And she says, yeah, it's our way to say that we really do care about you. You do? Regine said. Of course, Sheena says, and even better, we care about you just as well as everyone. So that's what Regine did. She sat in the audience just like what Jim suggested. So when Jim and the Holograms came out to perform, guess what they're wearing? They're wearing the exact same clothes like they did back at Starlight Mansion just the night before. The ones that they told Regine that they didn't like. Now they know better. The audience cheered because they just now realized how talented Regine really is. So, to top off the set, what better way to do it with the hologram song of Straight from the Heart? So, it was throughout the entire song the first thing we see is a man giving a woman some flowers. When the young boy saw what had happened, he thought he too should get some flowers for his mother, but he didn't have any money. So he decided to do something even better. He made a picture of the flowers instead and gave it to his mother, and his mother hugged the young boy. The last thing we see is a woman with a couple of bags of groceries boarding the bus. Then one of the bus passengers grabbed one of the bags of groceries and allows the woman to sit down. After the woman sat down, the same man gave the bag of groceries back to the woman, and she smiled at him. So after the song came to an end, the audience cheered. So the next morning at the Countess's house, after the concert had ended, you see that Countess Devonson was busy taking phone calls in her study room. So you know what this means. Jim's concert was a hit because of the clothes that the holograms had worn the previous night. Of course, that made Regine very happy. Of course, even Jim agrees with her and says, I'm glad to see that we were wrong. And the reason why Jim made it so mission with Regine is because, well, they're just afraid to take any chances. But Jim says there is one thing we can agree on. Your instincts were right all along, and we should have thought of it from the start. So yes, you've heard right. Jim and the Huggers had learned their lesson and how to take Regine's talents so seriously instead of rejecting them. Even though Regine agrees with Jim, she said that she doesn't care what everybody else thought. It's her talent that counts. And of course, Regine was right in this case. And so that ends episode 9.